In this video today, right, you're going to be learning how, in very practical sense, how to deal with the paragraph heading question type. I've introduced all the tips and strategies I apply, right, in the previous video. So you want to, of course, if you hadn't watched that video, go watch that video, then come back here. This will put this video right now in better perspective for you. So we're moving right into the sample test I have before me right now. So I made mention of the fact that you have to be sure that the question is requiring there's a list of heading question type. And how did I say you're meant to do that? You're meant to read the instruction. So we have choose the correct heading for paragraph A to F. So you see, once you see this, you know you're dealing with paragraph heading. And you're supposed to do what? What are you writing? Write the correct number in boxes 14 to 19 on your answer sheet. So it means that if you find, for example, that the answer for number 14 is I, right, the answer for paragraph A, which is number 14, is I, you're writing I alone. You're not writing I along with the title. If you do that, you're going to miss the question. The IELTS is a rule-based kind of test. So sometimes questions appear easy, but if you break the rule, you miss the easiest kinds of questions. So what do you do next? You want to read the titles and have a sense of what each means, right? I said a finely balanced measuring machine. A finely balanced measuring machine. I says head injuries are a window into the brain. So the first one, a finely balanced, I want to see a machine talked about in detail, and that machine has to be balanced. It has to be, I don't know whether it could mean physical balance or balance in terms of functionality. So we'll see. I says head injuries are a window to the brain. Okay, someone has head injuries. So we want to see details about an experiment performed on how to better understand the brain from the injuries on the head. Measuring changes in the body with pretty obvious changes in your body weight. Measuring fatigue tiredness through finger movements. Okay, determine how somebody is tired by the finger movement. Now you're doing this quite quickly anyway. You don't want to waste time reading like I am reading. I'm trying to ensure that I get into your mind and help you understand this better. That is why I'm being this detailed. Effects of fatigue on young factory workers. I want to see that idea too, young factory workers, and the outcome of too much work or too much tiredness on their lives. Reasons behind early physiological research. Then we have estimating the difficulty of reading tasks. Okay, muscles theory of supported by experimental results. So I want to see which title represents each of these headings. Now the first title we have here. Paragraph already. Scientists in the late 19th century were beginning to investigate the functions of blood circulation, trying to tease out the reasons for variations in pulse and pressure, and to understand the delivery of energy to the functioning parts of our bodies. So this is a past research conducted by scientists. By the way, I've already seen specific keywords from this on the title, one of the title. So previous research and the purpose, right, to investigate. So of course, previous research and the purpose behind that research, right? Trying to tease out the reasons for. So I could point to something here. I'm sure you could see something it could possibly point to at this point. I can see reasons behind early research. So let's move on anyway. And the next sentence, Angelo Mosso, skip the date, that is not an essential detail. Well, one such pioneer, an Italian physiologist, talking about Mosso now, so we see a new detail, right? As was true of many of his enlightened, well-educated contemporaries, Mosso was concerned about the effect of the Industrial Revolution on the poorer working class. So remember, the research from the beginning was to investigate the function of blood circulation, trying to tease out the reasons for variations in blood pressure. And then this person focused on the effect of course, in the industrial era on working population. Hard physical labor and an excessively long working day shortened lives, created conditions conducive to accidents, and crippled the children, right? The children who were forced to work at such one of his most influential contributors to society came from his work and writing on fatigue. So obviously I can see certain keywords for this already. Now there is a little trick here. There are two titles that are potential answers. The first one is VII, which is reasons, right? Reasons for behind early physiological research. Now, what are the pointers I have to that? Scientists in the late 19th century, which points to an early time, were beginning early research, right? So look at that word, beginning, civic versions of the blood circulation, trying to tease out the reasons. And every other reason there was, of course, about that. And we see another point about an early date too. This man's research was done, and this man was a pioneer. And if you know what pioneer means, of course, to be the forerunner or one of those who kickstarted an ideology or an event. So we see a lot of pointers to early physiological research. And of course, physiological research, this man is a physiologist, and we're trying to investigate the effect of stress, the effect of work on stress on the human physiology. So we have physiological word pointers, had physical labor, we have all of those words, right? A lot of details for that title. There's another title that could work and could be tempting, especially when you're not paying very close attention. This is what I have here. Effects of fatigue on young factory workers. Now, let's compare the number of times we see the idea of early physiological research and fatigue on young factory workers. Fatigue on young factory workers is only mentioned at this point. Hard physical labor and an excessive long working hours, working day shortened lives, created conditions conducive to accident and crippled the children who are, in this case, young working people who were forced into such work at an early age. So you see, if you compare the number of times you see that idea of young workers and number of times you see the idea of reasons behind an early research, you can tell the answer already. Answer for this paragraph is undoubtedly option VII. So you simply write VII in front of number 14. That's how you choose your answers. Yes, so we've taken this out of the way. The next paragraph we have to deal with. Early experiments in any field find themselves having to construct previously unknown. This is point. There's nothing about paragraph heading. You could be walking through and discover that something is better, but I doubt that any other paragraph could better represent reasons behind early physiological research, because the reason is quite clear, trying to tease out the reasons for variation. So obviously, even the word reason, I'm trying to tease out, point to that already. So let's see what this could be possibly saying. Early experiments in any field that find themselves having to construct previously unknown equipment to investigate fields of study and as yet unexplored. Okay, early fields trying to work with equipment. So I've seen something pointing to something. I can see equipment. Do we have that mentioned anywhere? I can see a finely balanced machine. Okay. Let's see what makes perfect sense. There's ergograph, reasons for the development of ergograph rather. So let's see, moving on. Mosso had reviewed the work of fellow scientists. Okay, he's going through the work of other people who had worked on isolated muscles, such as those extracted from frogs, and who had observed movement and fatigue when these were stimulated electrically. Okay, this person trying to, of course, investigate previous research before him. He found two major issues. Oh, he has issues with those research, with their methodology. Particularly, there was a lack of evidence, both that the findings would be relevant to the human body and that the dynamometers used to measure the strength of movement could give accurate results. So he has issues with the research. He therefore became determined to construct an instrument, so yes, to measure human muscular effort and record. So I think I have seen a lot of details. First of all, I see something that points to an early research, which is quite limited. We see how that drifted to the point that this person is trying to better previous research by developing an instrument. So I have an idea now what my answer should look like. The dominant detail gives us the idea that somebody is trying to develop on a previously made experiment, the reasons for that interest. So from the titles here, a finely balanced measuring machine. The machine is not fully discussed. Whatever he the machine he determined on using was not fully discovered, so we can't use that for that title. I head injuries, totally off. Measuring changes in weight, but no. Measuring fatigue through finger movements, no. Reason for development of the echograph, this makes sense. I can see reason for development, but I haven't, of course, seen the echograph. But I can see the motivations behind. The previous research were not very good, so he had to develop something better, an instrument, but we don't have that detail mentioned. So I'm holding on to that answer tentatively until I am certain. Otherwise, nothing else seems to make sense in line with my prediction. So this is where I made a prediction, right? And of course, nothing else makes sense but that. But then if I'm reading further, and this is something you should also apply. As you read further, you could determine that there are better paragraphs for a particular title than the one you're currently on. The next one, option C, his device was named echograph. Obviously, this paragraph is a continuity of the previous one. So we now see the idea of echograph, although not mentioned in the previous paragraph, but it makes a lot of sense. There is this transition used. His device was named, so continuing from that previous paragraph. Meaning work recorder. So I think I'm certain now about the answer for number 15 being paragraph B, right? The answer should be at this point VII. No, V rather, sorry. Reason for development of the echograph. So number 15 should be V. Moving on, you want to note this down, right? As I cannot currently write on my screen at the moment. So you want to note this down and you can take a look again at the video and of course be certain why those answers are correct. Meaning work recorder. To modern eyes, it seems remarkably simple, but such is true of many inventions when viewed with hindsight. So this machine is being described. This is pointing to something already, a finely balanced measuring machine. But then I am not certain about the idea of balance. It allowed the measurement of the work done by a finger. Something new, finger, because I had read the titles before. I can immediately spot something I had previously seen on the titles. I can see finger. I can also see the idea of this machine being described. Now, down to that last tip I mentioned in the previous recording, right? I'm going to determine which has more occurrence. Finger, as it was repeatedly curled up and straightened. There was basically two parts. The finger is still being talked about. Finger research. One held the hand in position, so hand pointing still to finger, right? Palm up by strapping down the arm to a wooden, so I can see on that pointer to finger. This was important to prevent any unintentional movement of the hand and that pointer to finger. While the experiment was taking place, the other part was a record device that drew the movements of the finger vertically on a paper cylinder. The index and ring fingers. This is a no-brainer at this point. The middle finger. So it's pretty obvious. I just played that last tip and see how beautifully it worked. Now, this paragraph is not so much about the device than it is about the finger experiment involved in using the device. Moving on, I'm sure you can still see we have the finger had to raise and lower the weight. So this is a no-brainer. At this point, we are certain. I just did that comparison. Number of times we see that finger idea is more than the number of times we see a finely balanced machine idea. So the answer for this is apparently IV. So paragraph C is out of the way. Beautiful. Measuring fatigue through finger movements. Now, paragraph D. Mosso's interest in the interaction between psychology and physiology led to another machine. We have another machine. So that's first title finally may not be out of the way. By the way, you don't get to use all titles. You can see the number of paragraphs we have are less than the number of titles we have. So not all titles will be used, right? But then that first title that we discarded earlier stands a chance here, I guess. He was intrigued to observe the pulsing of circulating blood in patients who had suffered traumatic damage. Traumatic brain damage. We've seen something beautiful or something entirely new. We saw something about the brain in the titles. Yes, this idea of head injuries. So we've seen something pointing to that. So we are holding between these, right? And we're going to play the same technique of seeing which has more recurrence in this title. So in patients who had suffered traumatic damage to the skull or cranium, the brain of the head, of course, skull or cranium points to the head. Injury. In this patient, what patient? These, of course, pronoun points you back to an earlier used noun. So the recurrence of a pronoun tells you that earlier used antecedent, that earlier used noun for that pronoun, right, is still going on in the passage. A lack of bone covering the brain allowed the strength of the heart pumping to be seen beneath the skin. The ability to now see through the skin from this head injury. He carried out experiment to see whether certain intellectual activities, pointing of course to the brain, such as reading or solving a problem, or emotional response, such as sudden noise. See the idea of reading, by the way, which is very minimal. I'm not even contesting that at all. No reading was mentioned in one of the titles. Estimating difficulty of reading that, but of course we saw how that worked in the first paragraph. This is too minimal to form the bulk of this paragraph, all right, the title for the paragraph. So moving on. Or emotional, such as to sudden noise, would affect the supply of blood to the brain. He detected some changes in the blood supply and then wanted to find out if the same would be true of individuals who had no cranial damage. Points to brain damage too. So obviously this is not about the machine, it is no more about the machine than it is about the damage and what the damage can help the researcher discover about the brain. So perfect. Head injuries are a window into the brain. Head injuries, cranial damage, suffer traumatic damage to the skull or brain. So you see you can count the number of times I saw the idea of brain damage and of course head injuries. Options. This is taken out of the way. Let's highlight that to be certain. We have some more titles, right? We have that finely balanced machine. We have measuring changes in the body with estimating the difficulty of reading tasks and muscle theory supported by experimental results. Option E, which is paragraph 18. So let's see. His solution was to design another instrument to measure brain activity. We see the idea of instrument. That particular first title is very persistent. It just wants to come out anyhow. In uninjured subjects, he designed a wooden table. See, I see the machine being discussed a little further. Or for the human table to lie on, which was placed over another table. Okay. Balanced. The idea of balance. So I think the idea of the balancing finally is stability as opposed to functionality of the machine. Okay, another like a seesaw that would allow the subject to tilt. So a seesaw would allow the subject to tilt. Okay, but a balance on the fulcrum. So the fulcrum would allow the subject to tilt with head a little higher than feet, or vice versa. Heavy weights beneath the table maintained stability. See, a rephrase of the idea of balance of the whole unit, as the intention was to measure very. Okay, moving on. Once the upper table was adjusted, pointing to balance, to be perfectly horizontal, pointing to balance. So I think that first title takes the cake already this time. Yes, this breathing and pauses measured in the hands and feet were also recorded. So yes, the balance of a particular machine used for measuring. So yeah, finally title I has a home with paragraph E. So I hope that was clear enough and yet you get to put those tips in practice as you prepare to take the IELTS pretty soon, I guess. And of course, feel free to engage me via the comment section. You want to have to drop questions. If you have any questions, or if you have reservations, or if you like this video, just use the like button to that effect. I will be pleased to respond to all your messages you send to me through the comment section. And of course, if you're new, subscribe. Thank you very much for staying to the end. Wish you the very best on your test.